Okay, I suppose today's talk wraps up this series on Singaporean art, okay, which started in about, I think in March, right? March or April. Okay, and we're going to end off with the contemporary art scene, right, in Singapore. Okay, I don't know whether I can assume that, all of you know this term called contemporary, or this term called contemporary art, right? Do you? Because I think it's not really the place where, I need to go into detail about this, because this was covered in the talk I gave last year. And if you want to know more about contemporary art, you can actually go to the Ode to Art website on YouTube, and then, you can see a series of videos, right? Of the talks that I gave here, right? And one of them is on contemporary art, okay, where I try to unpack this term, okay? This can be a rather ambiguous or even difficult term called contemporary art, okay? Okay, but in short, I think contemporary art refers to what they call a kind of experimental or alternative art practices, okay, that go beyond, the conventional practices of painting, sculpture, drawing. All right, and contemporary art, emerged in the West, right? Let's say in the 1960s, right? Okay, so in short, that's really contemporary art. It's really, a kind of alternative art practices. Okay, and these alternative art practices includes, art forms like performance art, installation art, conceptual art, right? Okay, and today we have artists, mixing many media and materials together, right? Okay, so art is constantly evolving. Okay, so today we're just going to focus on the Singaporean contemporary art scene. Okay, and contemporary art, I suppose, emerged at different times in different places. Okay, as I mentioned, I suppose in the West you can push the beginnings of contemporary all the way to Marcel Duchamp, where he exhibited his notorious, urinal, right, which is entitled Fountain, right? But in Singapore, right, when do you all think, contemporary art sort of first emerged? Okay, which is to say, an artist doing something that really, try to question the prevailing attitudes towards art, okay, and how art was received at that time. Anyone knows? Who did something quite radical, right? Anyone sort of old enough to remember? Okay. Right? Maybe not. Okay, maybe, as I said, this is still quite a new area for many people, contemporary Singaporean art. Although we tend to think that, it's kind of hip to talk about contemporary and all that, okay, but there's also the kind of academic discourse surrounding what contemporary art is, okay, and this so-called defining moment, whatever you call it, critical turn, contemporary turn, right, took place in 1972, okay, where this artist, okay, and this artist, Cheo Chai-hiang, is already in his 60s today, right, he submitted a work. I won't say he submitted a work, but he actually mailed, okay, he sent a mail, okay, and that mail, that envelope itself consists or contains a set of instructions, right, okay, and he submitted this to the Modern Art Society, or for submission into the Modern Art Society's annual exhibition, okay, and I think it was addressed to the president of the Modern Art Society, which at that time was Ho Ho Ying, okay, who was the most recent recipient of the Cultural Medallion Award, right? And that set of instructions, this was not really the first time that, it's done. This is really part of the strategy of what they call conceptual art, all right? An artist in America called, I can't remember his name now. Okay, but anyway, he also gave a set of instructions to some artists, okay, who just need to follow instructions to paint a work, all right? Okay, or to paint a few works. Okay, that's it. That's part of, as I said, the strategy of conceptual artists. Okay, so Cheo Chai-hiang submitted this with instructions, okay, to draw a series of lines, okay, and those series of lines would then, intersect both the wall, okay, and the floor. Okay, so it will just be like two rectangles, okay, adjoining the floor and the wall. And it's to be called Singapore River. Right, Singapore River. Okay, and Ho Ying, you know, I mean, again, some people criticize him for rejecting the work, okay, which I think is not too fair. Okay, he has his own reasons, you know, for doing that. Okay, and he rejected it. He says partly because of his lack of content, his lack of physical form and presence, and aesthetic appeal. Okay, because he said that if you want to do art, okay, you must also think of the viewer. Okay, so what will the viewer think of such a work? Okay, which is not, you know, well, to him it's not carefully thought through or, you know, carefully fabricated. Okay, so, you know, so it was rejected. Okay, and this became a kind of a cause célèbre for Cheo Chai-hiang, okay, in his advocacy of, you know, contemporary art, right? And it's really one of the most discussed episodes, okay, in contemporary art, okay? And I think he didn't get to realize this work until maybe 20 years later, okay, or so. Okay, in fact, you can, well, realize this work anywhere, you know. I mean, just follow the set of instructions that he gave. Okay, and I'll come to this quotation by Cheo Chai-hiang, right, a bit later. And this is the work. Cheo Chai-hiang, Singapore River. Okay, that's only one of the, you know, several manifestations of this work. Okay, it has been exhibited in different forms, in different places. Okay, but more or less is that it's a rectangular form. Okay, you know, and adjoining the wall and the floor. Okay, and why do they call it Singapore River? Okay, you realize that this was done in 1972, and at that time, you know, the Singapore River was perhaps the most popular subject for art. Okay, many painters would go there, you know, the Watercolor Society would go to Singapore River to paint. Okay, and they would just paint what they saw without thinking or without even knowing why they did it. Okay, so that was Cheo Chai-hiang's biggest, you know, point of contention. Okay, that these artists are not thinking, right? Okay, so this is really the first instance of, you know, what we can call conceptual art in Singapore, and it really marked, you know, the start of contemporary art, right, in Singapore. Okay, and this was recognized by the art historian called T.K. Sabapati. Okay, and he wrote later that, you know, this was a critical turn. Okay, because previously, you know, artists were doing abstract art or, you know, Nanyang style paintings. Okay, and this was really the first instance of, you know, contemporary work. So, in an article that was published in Chinese, you know, Cheo advocated the following. Okay, for example, you know, rejection. Contemporary art is a rejection of formalism. Formalism means really like modern art, you know, abstract art. Basically, that's it, right? Okay, works which emphasize the formal qualities, okay, which is line, color, shape, etc. Okay, and inclusion of objects not previously regarded as art. Okay, and Duchamp, as I mentioned, did that, you know, years ago in the 1920s with his urinal. Okay, and you see Singaporean artists increasingly using found objects as part of their work, right? And also the emphasis on artistic process. Okay, artists want to draw attention, okay, to the processes and materials of their work, right? Also the use of indigenous materials. Okay, so contemporary art again in Singapore and in Southeast Asia is specific to the social and cultural context of this region. Right, so that's what makes our contemporary also quite unique, okay, compared to those in the West. Okay, and also the visual experience need not be the only reference, okay, for the creation of visual arts. Okay, for example, text, okay, text, words, right, can also, you know, become part of the creative process. Right, and lastly, you know, and we see it also today, you know, increasingly so today, incorporation of audience participation in the creative act. Okay, but this was Cheo Chai-hiang writing in the 1970s. Okay, and it was also to have a great impact on, you know, the development of the contemporary scene here. Because in 1979, there was this sculptor called Tan Teng Kee. Okay, and you go around Singapore, you'll see Tan Teng Kee sculptures, you know. He specialized more in abstract sculpture, right? But in 1979, he did something radical, right? Okay, and this work was entitled The Picnic, okay? And I think it took place in a park or something like that, right? With audience. And he did a 100-meter long painting. And then he would ask the audience, he would cut it according to the wishes of the audience, probably how long they want it to be, and, it will be given to them, okay? And this was culminated in the incineration of one of his sculptures. He burned, right, one of his sculptures. So that was very radical for quite a conventional sculptor, I would say. Okay, and that act was also considered to be quite a radical gesture, radical act. Okay, and it was considered also to be, part of the developing contemporary art scene. Okay, it's what they call performance art. Okay, where the artist did a kind of performance. Okay, so that was in 1979. But it wasn't until maybe more than 10 years later that really, the contemporary art scene began to really, take off here in Singapore. So what happened? What caused the shift? Okay, a kind of seismic shift, okay, which resulted in the proliferation, as I mentioned, of alternative art forms like installation and performance. Okay, this was due in part to social and political changes. Okay, you know that in the 60s, in the 70s, Singapore was very much focused on building the nation, on nationhood, right? And of course, society has changed. In the 1980s, there were different priorities, okay? And so perhaps this caused the kind of, environment to emerge where contemporary art could thrive, okay? And you also have increasingly artists who started to work collaboratively, okay, and also across a wide range of media and disciplines. Okay, so you have an artist not only doing painting, but these artists also would do sculpture or installation or performance. Okay, I suppose the emergence of what you call a multidisciplinary artist. Okay, and art was also removed from the gallery context to include public sites, right, that would involve interaction between the audience and the artists. Okay. And also there was a, especially after the 1990s, there was a proliferation of artist-organized shows and artist-run space such as the Fifth Passage, okay, which is now defunct, right? And I'll tell you what happened later on. I mean, it was not the direct cause of it being defunct, but maybe an indirect cause. Okay, and the Artist Village, which still exists today, okay, is registered as a society. Okay, now, whenever we talk about contemporary art, I mean, this would be the first, the Artist Village would probably be the first kind of thing that will enter into the discussion. Okay. Of course, there were one or two kind of activities, even before the Artist Village that have been under-acknowledged, okay, but I don't think there's a time and space to talk about that, right? Okay, so the Artist Village cannot claim to be probably the, the first artist to, experiment with alternative art forms. Okay, there have been artists, a few years before them, right? I mean, Tan Teng Kee is one already, right? You saw Tan Teng Kee's, the picnic where he burned one of his sculptures. Right, that can be considered to be a kind of performance, okay, or performance art. TAV. Have you heard of the Artist Village? Okay, right. It's really a artist collective. Okay, a group of artists coming together. Okay, and in this case, they came together, they lived together, okay, and also they worked together, right? And they live in this this place in Ulu Sembawang, right? It's actually a kind of a kampong-like setting, okay, with zinc roofs and all that, and you have pigs and chickens running around, okay, and the kind of the mentor and the leader of this group of artists, okay, is Tang Da Wu, the venerable Tang Da Wu, right? Or we call him the elusive one, right? Okay, because sometimes it's hard to find, right? Even for an interview, and he always is quite shy, about being interviewed and all that. Okay, and so this TAV was founded in 1988. Okay, and Tang invited his friends and students. Okay, and today they have become the established names in the Singaporean contemporary art scene. Lee Wen, Amanda Heng, Vincent Liao, Zai Kuning, okay, and people like that. Okay, and at this height, TAV housed 35 artists, and there were collaborations with other artists as well. Okay, and other groups of artists. Okay, on the right, you can see a signage pointing to the artist village. Okay, but unfortunately, 3 years later, okay, it has to move. Okay, because that place was marked for redevelopment. Okay, and he never found permanent housing after that. Okay, but today the TAV, who has a younger group of artists, they are based in Pulau Ubin, right? Well, at least I don't think they have their office in Pulau Ubin, but you know they run a kind of residency where artists could do work there in Pulau Ubin. And on the lower right, you see a performance happening. We don't see this nowadays. Huh? Okay, Tang Da Wu on the left, okay, with a few other artists, okay, doing a performance. I think they're trying to get down or get on board a bus or something, probably getting down a bus. Okay, the eminent art historian T.K. Sabapati, okay, this is what he says, right? And he wrote this, when he was witnessing, right, this group of artists, okay, doing such practices, and and he was excited by it, right? And that's what he says. And he says that we wait to see what else they could do. And these are some observations of him. Okay, that they are interested in art as a continuous process rather than as a finished work. Okay, so that's really the premise of conceptual art, of contemporary art, right? Okay, and they seek to use artistic medium boldly and directly, without artifice or ornamentation. So they are not concerned with making art that is beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. All right. And also, I pointed out earlier, they wish to draw the viewer into an active, dynamic relationship with the artwork. Okay. All right. Okay, so TAV, they provided what you call an open space for artists, to experiment, to interact, collaborate with each other, okay, and to bring art practice to a new level of criticality. Now, this word called criticality, right, it has been identified as one of the characteristics of contemporary art. Okay? Now, when we use the term criticality, it doesn't refer to something that's negative. Okay? In the context of art, criticality refers to practices which, in a sense, question the prevailing attitude. Okay, practices which confront the prevailing practices, right? Okay, so and also practices which tend to relate art, okay, to the social and economic and political context. All right. Okay, and many of these artists went on to have very successful individual careers. Lee Wen, Amanda Heng, okay, Zai Kuning, people like that. Okay, and also what, they also benefited by studying and exhibiting abroad. In fact, Tang Da Wu came back to form the Artist Village after 20 or more years of studying abroad, okay, in the UK, right? And of course, one of the earliest performances he did was to hang some linens in gullies in Ang Mo Kio. At that time, Ang Mo Kio was a developmental town, okay? And then these linens would get soiled and all that. And he exhibited these linens, in the National Gallery in the National Museum, okay, the National Museum Art Gallery, right? Okay, Tang Da Wu. Okay, you all know this work called "Don't Give Money to the Arts"? I'm sure those who are in the museum circles and all that, you probably know. Okay, and this work can. Now, what happened is this: it took place in 1985 in this Singapore Art Fair, right? In which the president Ong Teng Cheong was the guest of honor. Okay, so and 1995 was an significant year because only a year before, okay, because of a certain incident which I'm going to highlight later, okay, the government cut funding for performance art. right? Okay, so another way of looking at contemporary art or experimental art, whatever you call it, alternative art practices, is that this is what they call non-commercial art practices. Okay, so the government, cut funding, okay, for performance, to performance art, okay, just the year before. And I think Tang Da Wu wanted to make a certain statement, okay, and so he asked a fellow artist to introduce him to the president. Right? So he approached the president and he asked the president for permission to put on the jacket. So he put on the jacket, and if you look at the words there, right, the jacket, it has, I think, emblazoned in gold, "Don't give money to the arts." Right? Okay? It's a very sarcastic statement, right? Don't give money to the arts. Right? I mean, it can be read at several levels here. Okay, it could be a protest against, the cutting of funds the year before. Okay, and to ask the government to, give money to this, contemporary artists, who do such cutting edge practices. Okay, rather than to commercial art. Okay, and then not only that, right? He actually gave an envelope, okay, to the president. I don't think it's directly to the president, but maybe to his aide-de-camp, and in the envelope, okay, there's a slip of paper which says, "I am an artist, I am important." All right? Okay, so I suppose it sends quite a clear message, to the president. And in fact, I think that year or the year later, the president did sort of pledge his support, okay, for such, kind of contemporary practices. Okay, although it was not until 10 years later, in 2004, that really funding was restored, okay, for performance art in Singapore. So you can consider this to be a kind of performance art. And if you want to see the whole performance which has been dramatized, okay, you can in fact was shown on on Channel 5. That was like some years back. In this artist called Ho Zun Yan, right? He produced a series of films surrounding an iconic work of art in Singapore. It's called 4x4. Okay, and you can see this whole incident being dramatized in those series of shows. Okay, and this is what Tang Da Wu said. An artist should introduce to others what he sees or learns of something. His work should provide thoughts not to please the eyes or to entertain, much less for decorations. Okay. And he did this, what has now been recognized as a seminal work of art. Okay, it's called Tiger Sweep. Okay, and Tiger Sweep is another performance piece, and Tang Da Wu performed this in Keong Saik Street. Keong Saik Street or Road, right? Either one. But anyway, that's in Chinatown. And at that time, Chinatown was like a hotbed for prostitution. Right? And Tang Da Wu was an artist who was very much concerned with ecological and environmental issues. Right? And so here in this performance, he actually made, I think, 9 or 10 tigers. Okay, made them out of wire mesh and paper mache. Right? And he would act in all the roles. He would act as a tiger. He would act as the tiger spirit. Here he's dragging one of the tigers. They are painted white, okay, to signify the tiger coming back as a spirit. Okay, and and there are several objects here. Besides the tigers, there are also a bed. There's a basketball, I believe. There's also a rocking chair. Okay, now all these subjects are allusions to the sexual act, right? The rocking chair, the to and fro motion, even the bed and all that. Okay, and on the rocking chair itself is painted a symbol of virility. Okay, and as you know, in Chinese culture, okay, the tiger's whip, the penis of the tiger, is used as an aphrodisiac. Right? Okay, so this was really a protest against the tiger's penis being appropriated, okay, for sexual prowess, right? And So, you know, so it was, here you have one instance of a performance being done specific, right, to the Asian context, okay, to the Asian social cultural context, okay. You know, when I look at this photo, you know, I kind of marvel at the crowd, you know. I mean, look at the crowd. I mean, if you look at the crowd, these are not like your people who visit galleries, you know. These are people who are men in the streets, okay, your ape and all that, you know, okay. Right, watching Tang Da Wu perform. Okay, I think that's great, right? But I don't know whether they understand the thing, right? But at least it's quite entertaining. Okay, and then of course you have Lee Wen. Okay, Lee Wen, of course, now anyone here knows Lee Wen? Most of you? Of course, he was in the news recently at Art Basel. Okay, he, I don't know what happened to him. He fainted or lost consciousness. Okay, but anyway, they found him in the toilet bleeding, right? Okay, till today it's a mystery lah. There's speculation, but we shouldn't speculate, right? It's a mystery. Okay, but Lee Wen has always been that sort of artist who, you know, really, who stands for the underdog, I would say. Okay, he's someone who is very much concerned with social injustices, okay, with individuality and human freedom. Right, and this work itself is his most iconic work. It's called The Journey of a Yellow Man. Okay, I believe it was first performed in London. Okay, then it was performed in a number of other cities, where Tang Da Wu, Lee Wen would paint himself yellow from head to toe. Okay, and then he would walk in both, you know, urban and rural areas. Right, and now why does he do that? Okay, sometimes he carries a chain, a red chain, right, to signify, I suppose, human bondage. Okay, right. Now yellow, right? Yellow was, you know, to him a symbolic color. Okay, right. I mean, he's already Chinese, so why exaggerate? Why exaggerate his ethnicity? Okay, so by painting himself yellow, he's actually exaggerating, right? Okay, his ethnicity as a Singaporean of Chinese descent. Okay. But at the same time, I think by performing this work in different cultural contexts, in different cities, okay, he is actually testing assumptions that we have regarding race, regarding ethnicity, right? Because the color yellow means different things in different contexts, right? For example, if it's performed in India, or in Thailand, it could refer to the, you know, to the monks over there, okay, to the monasteries, okay, or it could, even in Thailand, it could refer to, you know, associate, you know, with venereal disease, for example, right? In Singapore, you know, the color yellow could be symbolic of, you know, our multicultural society, all right? Okay, so in a sense, he you know, he performed this work to test our assumptions regarding ethnicity, regarding, you know, kind of racial inequality, all right, and to probe assumptions about Asians, okay, because I think there are a lot of, you know, assumptions of, you know, Asians, and here he's trying to probe to destabilize such categories, okay. So it's also a work about identity itself, about racial, about ethnic identity. Oh, this is what he says, right? Okay, and next up we have Vincent Liao, right? Okay, I'm sure some of you will have heard of Vincent Liao. Okay, he was once what they call the enfant terrible of the Singapore art scene, right? You know, a very controversial figure. He was a key member of the Artist Village, and later on he started this collective called Plastic Kinetic Worms, okay, which unfortunately, you know, has closed down because of lack of funding. Okay, but I think PKW, as it's known, you know, has contributed quite significantly as well, right, to the Singaporean art scene. Okay, churning out publications, a publication called Vehicle. Okay, but unfortunately, you know, it was forced to close. And in 1992, Vincent Liao did a performance in which he would wear this a suit, okay, put on a Daddy Warbucks hat, a top hat, and then these shoes, okay, all made up of fake, okay, American dollar notes, okay. And then in this performance space in Hongbi warehouse, right, he would hop around like a toad, like a frog, okay, with a stack of bills in his mouth, okay. Now let me show you that. Now this, okay, in performance art, after the performance is done, what happened? Okay, I mean, you can only perform once, you know, I mean, it's documented in photographs, and then you have what you call these relics, okay, so what you have here are the relics of that performance, and these relics are collectible items. I mean, they are, you know, people collect them, okay, museums and all that, okay, collect them. Right, here you go. Okay, now, as you know, have you seen that toad in Chinese culture? That toad with a coin in his mouth, the three-legged toad. Okay, and it's supposed to bring good luck, right? Yeah, correct, or good fortune. Okay, so that's what Vincent is trying to do. But here the whole performance is a critique of materialism, of consumption, of capitalism. Okay, and also, you know, of superstitious beliefs in the pursuit of wealth. Right. So I think that was what he was trying to do here. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing right there, right? Okay, because I was not there in the right to see the performance. Okay, but I think you get the idea, right? And then just a year later, okay, in another, okay, anyway, this place called Hongbi Warehouse is quite an important space, right? And I think the Artist Village wanted this space to be like permanent housing, but again, it was marked for you know, redevelopment. Okay, so they never got to use that space. Okay. So a year later, he did this other performance called Coffee Talk. Okay, another iconic performance. And in the Coffee Talk, to cut a long story short, what he did in that is that during the course of the performance, he urinated and he drank his own urine. Okay, that may come as a shock to you. Okay, now why does he do that, or why did he do that? All right. Now, as you know, I mean, what he did was that he urinated and he drank. Okay, so it's a process of production and consumption. Okay, it's a kind of a critique of the art world. Okay, mainly, you know, critiquing commercial art, where an artist will produce and then you'll be consumed by the collector. Okay, but here, by producing and consuming his own urine, okay, he's conflating both production and consumption, right? So it's a critique against, you know, what he considered to be commercial art, right? But ironically, what happened is that as an inversion of that critique, he later on packaged his own urine, okay, and which can actually be bought, right? So if anyone wants to buy the urine, let me know, right? I can contact Vincent, and I'm not sure how much it costs. Okay, I think it's still available, right? Okay, the last time I know. Amanda Heng. Okay, I think she's probably the most well-known. I mean, besides Georgette Chen, you know, she's probably the most well-known, you know, female artist in Singapore. Okay, and Amanda Heng has played a very important role in the art discourse here, especially, you know, especially in the feminist, you know, in feminist art, right? And she, you know, besides being a member of the Artist Village, she also, I believe, founded this movement called Women in the Arts. I don't know whether it's still, yeah, it still survives, right? In any case, this is one of her most well-known works, right? It's called Another Woman. Okay, I believe it was first performed in the Fukuoka Art Museum. Okay, she performs there at that time, you know, quite on a regular basis in Japan, right? Especially in Fukuoka. And this work, right, is actually not only, I mean, it's a mixed media work. Okay, it's, there's photographs, there's also installation comprising objects taken from a home. Okay, and so what is this work about? Okay, who is this other woman? It's a mother. Okay, so this whole work is an investigation of memory. Okay, investigation of memory. And, you know, it's about woman's relationship with another woman. It's about woman's place, right, in the Asian home. You know, I mean, as you know, Asian homes, you know, they are dominated by, you know, patriarchal figures, right? Okay, so in this series of photographs, sometimes, you know, the two women are clothed, sometimes unclothed. Okay, and you see them in a series of gestures. Sometimes they hug one another, sometimes they stand at a distance. Okay, so in this work, I suppose the two women, especially Amanda, they are trying to reassert, okay, their identity as independent women, right? As independent women, and also Amanda here is trying to reclaim her relationship with her mother. Okay, because you know, in the Asian family, you know, there's a kind of unspoken psyche, you know, where, you know, women cannot assert yourself, you know, too much, right? Okay, and you know, also the distance between them was reinforced by the different languages that they speak. Okay, the mother could only speak dialect, okay, which Amanda was not very conversant with. Okay, so in this work, you know, what gave her the idea of this work is that when the mother asked her to take a shot of her, you know, when the time comes, you know, when she kicked the bucket and all that. Okay, so she realized that she could make a connection with her mother then. Okay, so she suggested this project to her mother. Okay, and I suppose it is kind of therapeutic, if you can use that word. Okay, this whole project. Okay, because she did, I suppose, reclaim that relationship with her mother. Okay, and it was during this project that she tried to explain to the mother why she gave up her job as an income tax officer to become a struggling artist, right? Okay, right. So it's yes, it's an interesting work. And this other work as well is called Less Chat. Okay, where Amanda. Okay, what happened in this work? This, I suppose, is what you call relational aesthetics. Okay, and I mentioned it a few times, you know, before about the interaction between the audience and the artist and the artwork. Okay, so this is what is happening here. Okay, where this was first again performed in Japan at a shopping mall. Okay, where Amanda would set up a table, and a table will have a pile of tauge, bean sprouts. You know, I mean, tauge is it Hokkien or Malay? Okay. Anyway, tauge, we call it tauge, bean sprouts. Okay. And here we have the practice or habit of plucking the tail and the head, sometimes the head, mainly the tail of the bean sprouts. Right? So Amanda would invite people to come and sit with her around the table, okay, and pluck the bean sprouts. And while they pluck the bean sprouts, okay, they would probably have tea, and then they would chat with one another about art, about life, I suppose. Okay? So here, I suppose it's not only a work that speaks of the past, of nostalgia. Okay, I suppose this work, you know, also functions at different levels. For example, it became a nexus for social interaction, for people to gather together to talk. And I suppose that's a disappearing kind of thing nowadays, especially with social media. You know, people hardly, even when you are together, right? A lot of, you know, eating, you know, face to face, you're on your handphone, your iPhone, whatever. Okay, so, you know, here again, I suppose she's talking at one level about communication, perhaps. Okay, and also at another level, it talks also about interaction between women. I mean, normally such activities was confined to the woman of the home. Okay, but as you know, such activity is also becoming quite obsolete. It's diminishing. Okay, so it may prove to be a lifting of a burden for women as well. All right. Okay, so it's an interesting, you know, kind of work. I don't know how many of you enjoy plucking bean sprouts. Okay, right? When I say lifting the burden, I you know, to me sometimes when I pluck, you know, it's a chore, you know, right? I can't get past like 20, you know. And it's not easy to peel sometimes. You need certain skills. Okay, and then we also have, you know, in 1988. Okay, besides the TAV, that's why, you know, a lot of emphasis has been put on the TAV, but we often tend to forget other artists or group of artists who also contributed to the emerging contemporary art scene at that time. right? So in 1998, you have Saleh Japar, Goh Ee Choo, Chandrasekaran, okay? And they're all graduates of NAFA, okay, presenting what they call Trimurti. Okay, a multimedia presentation comprising paintings, sculptures, installations, performances at the Goethe Institute. Now, the Trimurti is a term, okay, used in Hindu cosmology to refer to the three major gods of Hinduism: Shiva, the destroyer; Vishnu, the preserver; and Brahma, the creator. Okay, so each of them took on a role, a certain god. So Chandra, I think, became the destroyer, Ee Choo, the preserver, Saleh, the creator, right? And the artists wrote in their catalog, okay, that the Trimurti transformed this art space, okay, into an energy space. Okay, I mean, they use the terms that you use in Hinduism, okay, where they transform this space into a kind of cosmological, universal space, right? Okay, and they work side by side, okay, using you know, multimedia expressions. All right. Okay, and now it is a very significant exhibition. Okay, if you look at the last line, it says expressing the total art concept. Okay, this was probably the first time where, you know, such an exhibition of multidisciplinary, multimedia works were shown. Right, so it's a very significant exhibition in that sense. The Trimurti, right? Ee Choo, Saleh, and Chandra. Okay, and Chandra and Saleh today, they are my colleagues at LaSalle. Okay, I mean, to tell you, if they were graduates from NAFA, you wouldn't believe it, right? Okay, they were actually quite rebellious, right? Okay, that's why they could do such works. Okay, because, you know, NAFA is a very conservative, right, college. Okay, but these three are hardly conservatives. Okay, Ee Choo is a bit more conservative, I suppose. Okay, later on, you know, Ee Choo was to go on to win multiple awards, okay, for his paintings. Saleh has represented Singapore in the first Venice Biennale, among other things. Chandra, of course, is one of the most well-known artists here, right, Singapore. Okay, he's a performance artist, you know. He also does painting. And so those are the three works that they did. Okay, from left, you know, you have Creation by Saleh, okay, and then in the middle you have Chandra's work, okay, Destruction, and then on the right, okay, Goh Ee Choo's work, okay, Preservation. And they were not associated with the artist village, right, as I mentioned. Okay, but they came together only, I think, for this particular show. Okay, they never really, you know, kind of stayed together, right, as a collective. I won't call them a collective, okay, it's more a collaboration between them, okay, during this time. Okay, the institutionalization of the contemporary. I don't know how many of you have heard of Rem Koolhaas or have read his works, or at least some of his works. I mean, not only his work, but rather that particular article, okay, where, you know, he talks about the westernization and modernization of Singapore, okay, and it's a kind of a critique as well, okay, of how Singapore is run. Okay, if you have not, you know, it'll be interesting to, okay, to read that particular work, the article. Okay, and this is just an excerpt of that. Okay, and it's quite interesting. He says that Singapore is managed by a regime that has excluded accident and randomness. It's very true. Okay, even its nature is entirely remade. Right? I wonder what nature. You know, I suppose all your trees and all that you have seen. Okay, Garden by the Bay is one example. Okay, it is pure intention. If there is chaos, it is authored chaos. Okay, how true? I mean, we can think of examples. Right? If it is ugly, it is designed ugliness. If it is absurd, it is willed absurdity. Okay, Singapore represents a unique ecology of the contemporary. Okay. Now later on, we're going to look at one or two works that, you know, really reflect what, you know, Koolhaas has written about. Okay, so you see, you know, a kind of paradox here where, unlike other countries in the region, okay, contemporary art in Singapore is, you know, is very much, in a sense, still engineered by the state. Okay, you have NAC giving money to contemporary artists, right? You know, you have Gilman Barracks, for example, being engineered, you know, by EDB, the Economic Development Board, right? So nothing here grows organically like, you know, in some country in Southeast Asia, right? Okay, so that poses certain unique situations for contemporary art in Singapore as well, and the practices that are emerging here. Okay, so in 1989, very important year as well. 1989, you know, the government released a white paper called the Advisory Council for Arts and Culture. Okay, anyway, they form a kind of a body, you know, a committee, okay, which made recommendations for development of art and culture in Singapore. 1989, okay, that's a very important paper, okay, because it envisioned Singapore to be a global city for the arts, okay. So LaSalle, I believe, Esplanade, okay, all of them, you know, kind of emerged, right, from that paper, okay. And now, of course, in 2000 and beyond, you have other kind of reports like the Renaissance City Report, okay. I think 2 or 3 of that Renaissance City Report were released, okay. Also, you know, in a sense, putting in place specific plans, you know, for Singapore to be the hub, the global hub, not only of the region but of the world. Okay. So, so in 1990, you know, so things will begin to happen, especially in the 1990s. Okay, 1990, the substation was founded by, okay, the late Kwa Pao Kun. Okay, and today it remains quite a significant space for, you know, contemporary art. Okay, for both visual and performing arts in Singapore. Okay, it's really an experimental art space. Okay, but of course today it has lost a lot of its charm, you know. Okay, because of the gentrification of the area, you know, you have, okay, before you had the Char Kway Teow store, you know, opposite and all that. So it's more a bohemian place, but today you have lost that kind of charm, right? And then 1996, okay, the SAM was set up. Okay. 2006, the Singapore Biennale with the theme of belief, okay, was, you know, that was the first Singapore Biennale. Okay, I think you all recall this. That was like 8 years ago, right? Time really flies, 8 years. Okay, recently we have our 4th installation of the Biennale, right, the 2013. But I thought this was one of the most, if not the most memorable of the Biennale, right? You agree? I think because of the space, huh? Right? I mean, it's accessible as well. And the space itself, I think, using the City Hall and the Supreme Court, right, were quite suitable for showing certain kinds of work. I don't know how many of you have seen this work, right? I mean, this was one of the most memorable work, at least for me, okay, by Donald Ong. It was first shown in the, right, the Singapore Biennale, the 2006 Biennale. And it was actually shown in 4 separate judges' chambers. Okay, and it was quite dimly lit. Okay, it was purposefully done so. Okay, but before that, who is Donald Ong? Have you heard of Donald Ong? Okay, yes. Okay, some of you have, you know, nod your head, and I think she's an artist who is worth, you know, knowing about, right? Now Donna is, you know, she's an installation artist. She works with mainly with found objects, just your ordinary objects. Okay, but she's someone who have what you call a kind of obsessive sensibility and obsessive fixation with details. I mean, if you look at her works, you know, you can't but be struck by the details in her work and the amount of effort that she put in, right, in her work. Okay, and then also the kind of narrative that such works, you know, could be constructed. You know, I mean, her works speaks of hidden desires. It speaks of certain fantasies, right, dreams perhaps. Okay, but it also allows you to construct your own story, your own narrative. Okay, so this and I remember one work. You know, I think it's a work called Waterfall. Okay, where she arranges some number of glass containers, okay, apparently at random, until you look closer. Okay, that's the whole thing with Donna's work, is that it rewards the audience who take the time to look at the works. Okay, so if you look closely, okay, and those containers are actually connected by elaborate water system. Okay, so it actually flows from one container to another, right? Now for this particular work, it's called Secret Imperious Chrysalis. All right, as I mentioned, it was shown in 4 separate chambers. Okay, and when you go in, you know, I mean, if you look at the work on the upper right, okay, you would think that, well, you know, you're entering a mad scientist chamber. Okay, because what you'll see are these tubes, okay, glass containers containing not human fetuses, but, you know, baby dolls, okay, and then baby dolls, you know, submerged in water. Okay, so what's happening here? I mean, her work had a certain kind of surreal quality to it, a kind of, you know, even a psychological quality to it, right? Because you don't quite know what's happening. Okay, as I said, you can construct your own narrative, okay, surrounding her work. Okay, in another room, if you go in, you think that you're entering a kind of music chamber, right? Until you look closer and you see that, okay, the work is made up of ordinary objects like utensils, right? Okay, so there you have, you know, Donna Ong, who you know, have this kind of obsessive sensibility, okay, and a kind of attention to detail, right, in her work. Now, as I said, because the state, as I said, it's very paradoxical, okay, this relationship between the state and, you know, artists. Okay, because on the one hand, you know, you have funding from the government, and many artists have to rely on funding from government. And if you rely on funding from government, means that you have to do certain works. You cannot do certain works, rather. Okay, you are bound by, you know, the policies, for example, you know, of the National Art Council. Okay, so how are you going to produce alternative works? You can, but so long as the alternative works, you know, you're able to negotiate very carefully the boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not. Okay, and if you can't do that, then I suppose then you'll get into trouble. And I think that's the problem, you know, recently, where there's a controversy about the recent policy about self-censorship, right? Okay, I mean, that this can be debated, right? Okay, but anyway, okay, but this has resulted in several incidents as well. Okay, this kind of uneasy relationship, I suppose, between the state and artists, right? So many artists, you know, especially some artists, they are clever enough to be able to negotiate the terrain and to produce works that are what you call oblique and circumspect, meaning not too confrontational, all right? Then it's fine, okay? If you cross the boundary, that's when you get into trouble, okay? And this happened in 1994, okay? The Joseph Ng incident. Okay? How many of you have heard of the Joseph Ng incident? You have. Okay, some of you nod your head, but I think majority have not. Okay. Okay, now Joseph Ng incident. Okay, 1994, I believe in 1994, right? Okay, and this performance was organized by this group. I mentioned them earlier in the talk, the Fifth Passage. Okay, they have a space in Parkway Parade. Okay, and this work was performed there by Joseph Ng. Okay, and it was supposed to be a part of an overnight festival or something, or a 12-hour festival. Right, and you know, Joseph Ng wanted to use this performance as a protest against the arrest of 12 gay men. Okay, right? It's not so much a protest against the arrest of 12, but how it's reported in the newspaper. Right? How it's reported in the newspaper. So what he did was that he would have 12 tiles, white tiles. Okay, on the tile he would put tofu, you know tofu, right? Okay, square tofu on each tile, and then he would put a packet of plastic with red dye in it. Okay, and then he would wheel rotan, a cane. Okay, and then he would start this kind of ritual dance, you know, where he would sway and would leap around. Okay, and then he would then hit the red packet and the tofu with the cane. And of course, there's violent splatters of, of the red dye, which of course is meant to simulate blood. Okay, right. So that was what was happening, right? The performance. Okay, and then after that, this first act of the performance, you go to a corner, I suppose, and then he stood with his back to the audience. Okay, stripped his underwear, not fully, but so much so that you can see the upper part of his buttocks. Okay, and then he will cut his pubic hair. Okay, and then later on he will go back to the arena and then place some pubic hair on the center tile. Right. So to some people, such a cutting of pubic hair is a form of silent protest. Okay, and then he will ask someone for a cigarette, and then he would, I don't know whether he took some puffs, but after that he would start the cigarettes, right, on his armpit. Okay, right, and so that was the performance. And later on, of course, the police was called in. I don't know who called the police. Okay, the police was called in. Today we can laugh at it, huh? Okay, but I suppose, okay, later on I'll talk more about this, right? Okay, police was called in, and I think Joseph Ng and his collaborator, there's another artist, actually, Shannon Tam. Now, what Shannon Tam did was that he burned the newspaper where the incident was reported and drank it and vomited out. Okay, right? Okay, so that was part of the performance as well. So both of them were, I think they were arrested. Okay, they were not jailed. Okay, I don't think they were jailed, right? Anyone can recall whether they were jailed? No, right? They were not jailed. They were fined though, I think. Okay, but more important, I think they were banned from performing in Singapore. And up to today, Joseph Ng, okay, will not be able to receive a license to perform in Singapore. I think that's a long time, right? That's 20 years. Okay, it's a long time, but today he's kind of doing work in Bangkok and also in China. Okay, so that, and it's because of this incident that funding from the government was cut for the next 10 years. Okay, 10 years. So you can see 10 years is a long time. Okay, so contemporary art took, there was a setback of 10 years for contemporary art in Singapore. Right? And this episode, many people still have not forgotten, especially artists. Okay, so if you look at, if you go to certain exhibitions, artists still kind of do works which, would remind one of this particular, episode. Okay, and of course they are still not happy. I mean, performance art is still not totally free here. You are not free to perform, You need a license and all that still. Right, so this was a notorious episode, I suppose. And later on, there's this artist called Lu Zihan. Okay, Lu Zihan was, he did a re-performance of this work in 2012, I believe, right? And in front of a select group of audience, and you can only enter by registering, and I think if you're above 18, because there was full frontal nudity, okay, which never happened in the original piece, but Lu Zihan, right? And you can actually catch that performance in Vimeo, the full performance, including Joseph Ng's video. I actually wanted to show you that, but I couldn't find it, in my computer somewhere. But you can Google, Lu Zihan's performance, and you can watch the whole performance, including the original performance by Joseph Ng. Right? I like the headline. Okay, pubic public protest. So that's on the right. You see Shannon Tam there, right? Yeah, his collaborator. Okay, right. Putting as I said, she burned the newspaper and then drank it and then regurgitated. Oh, here you go. This is Lu Zihan, but this was done in 2012. Okay, so here he's using the rotan, the cane, okay, and he's whacking, right, the tofu, and you can see the red dye, okay, splashing, right. Okay, 2001, Singapore first participated in the Venice Biennale. And I think there was some controversy about this as well, right? I mean, Singapore stopped for a few years, right? And next year they are, was it this year? Next year. Okay, they are sending an artist called Charles Lim, okay, right, to Venice again. And also, you know, increasingly after 2000, you know, I think it's because of also of the Singapore Biennale that quite a number of our young contemporary artists receive exposure. Okay, and you know, when you have biennales, people from overseas, you know, curators, they will come, they will scout around, okay, and they will invite, you know, artists to participate. And many of our artists, you know, have achieved international success because of this. And, you know, who, not only that, but there are a young group of artists who are able to engage with a rapidly globalized art world, okay, using, I would say, you know, the global language of art, right? Okay, so I would say that, you know, today increased state funding, I mean, there's no doubt that the National Arts Council has increased their funding. Okay, there's also patronage from the private sector. Okay, and all these act as catalysts for young contemporary artists in Singapore to be successful. Okay, so I must recognize that yes, the art scene has changed quite a bit here, right? And young contemporary Singaporean artists, they are, you know, getting a lot more opportunities. Okay, this was a work that Singapore submitted, not submitted, but, you know, in 2005, Lim Se Chuan, okay, was sent as a sole representative of Singapore at the 51st Venice Biennale. Okay, and you know, this work is quite cheeky, right, in a way. Okay, you know, it says, I wanted to bring Mike over. Do you all know about this work? Okay, anyway, before that, Lim Se Chuan is someone who, he's a conceptual artist. Okay, so sometimes in one or two of his works, you know, you go in, you don't see anything, right? Okay, right. And I mean, he did that a couple of times. One, I think, in City Hall as part of the Singapore Biennale. Another one in LaSalle, where all you see is a bench, right? Okay. So for this work, he actually proposed to bring the 8-meter, 70-ton Merlion over to Venice. Okay, because what better way? You know, I mean, Venice is a chance for, you know, kind of countries, you know, to question notions of national representation at an international stage. Okay, so what better way than to bring this iconic symbol of Singapore, the Merlion, over to Venice? Okay, but of course, it was rejected. Okay, so I suppose this work is a kind of what you call an institutional critique. Okay, right, now institutional critique is a kind of a soft critique, right? A soft critique of you know, government processes, bureaucracy, the state, right? So it is, I suppose, a critique of the whole process here that he wanted to show in this work. Okay, the fact that he was not allowed to bring this work over because of bureaucratic obstacles. Okay, but ultimately this work was quite positively received, surprisingly. Okay, because why surprisingly? Because, I mean, it's a critique of, I suppose, you know, one of our most revered icons, the Merlion. Okay, it's a critique against the kind of marketing and promotional gimmick of the Merlion. Okay, now here in Singapore we have an ambiguous relationship with the Merlion. You all agree? Okay, right. I mean, we see it as a kitschy, you know, touristy symbol. Okay, but for me, I see it as a sculpture. It's a piece of sculpture. All right. Okay, but anyway, yeah. So it's a critique against that. I suppose even against the Merlion. So it was a surprise that, you know, this work was, I suppose, approved by, you know, the government. Okay, I mean, it sort of is I suppose it's, maybe it's a testimony to them, you know, that the government, that, you know, finally they were able to accept such works, right, which is can be considered to be quite risky and controversial. Okay, especially if it's a parody of you know, a kind of a national icon symbol like the Merlion. Okay, so I suppose this work maybe reflects the openness of the government already at that time. Okay, but it's an interesting work. It's a conceptual work. Okay, I'll wrap up everything, okay, by just showing, highlighting 7 or 8, of some of the most exciting contemporary artists today. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that, I have added a few slides, okay, so sometimes you find that, certain slides are missing, right? Okay, apologies for that. So, just to sum up what is happening today, again, as I mentioned, with the start of the TAV, I mean the contemporary art scene with the Artist Village, with Trimurti, okay, you have what they call process research-based approach to art. Okay, you see a lot of artists, focusing more on the process rather than on the finished product. That's one. And a lot of artists today also, they do a lot of research that informs their practice. Right? As I said, research is also part of the criticality of practice. Right? It's different from, let's say, an Ong Kim Seng who just paints, right? Okay, but so, in contemporary art, as I said, criticality is a, an important factor. Okay, and you have interdisciplinary artists working across a range of media and materials. Okay, interconnectedness between the local, regional, and international. So artists are not only working, right, using a local or even regional language. Okay, but working, to produce works that can connect with an international, global audience. I think that's important, and that's what gives many Singaporean artists, success abroad as well. Okay, people like Donna Ong, people like Michael Lee, right? And other such artists. Okay, and also artists, because as I mentioned, because of the changing socio-political, cultural landscape. Okay, artists are also examining issues now. Okay, so what you have is issue-based art, right? Relating to gender, sexuality, identity, history, politics. Okay, politics you have to be very careful, I told you before. Okay, you have to be able to carefully negotiate the terrain, right? In fact, there are 3 things to avoid here for contemporary artists. One is race. Okay, one is, what's that, I forgot, race. Politics, you can still do it, right? Religion, that's right, correct. Race, religion, and sex. I think not so much sex, but homosexuality, right? Okay, although you can still do it, but sometimes you have to put advisory and all that, right? Okay, but race and religion in particular, okay, are something that, I mean, you can address, but you have to do it in a very subtle way. Okay, and conceptual strategies like what you saw in Lim Sei Chuan's work, okay, are employed to critique institutional structures of art and power. Okay, so in that particular work by Lim Sei Chuan, you see that he was trying to question the system and structure of the Biennale, right? Of the whole notion of national representation at the Venice Biennale. Ho Zu Nian. Okay, Ho Zu Nian. Okay, and I don't know whether you have seen Ho Zu Nian's work. I think some of you have, right? He is one of the most acclaimed artists, I would say, working today. He is what you call, a multidisciplinary artist, right? I mean, he could paint, okay, but he has since kind of given up, painting, right? And to focus on, and then later on he went on to do video works. And then currently he's also doing theater. Okay, he's an artist who cannot really stand still, right? He will go from one media to another, very experimental artist. Okay, but an artist is also very, very intelligent, I would say. Okay, and that's because of his grounding in various disciplines. Okay, he's very interested in art history, art theory, philosophy, popular culture like music. Okay, so his work is a kind of condensation of of his multiple interests, right? And it's presented in a very complex way, but very rich, visually rich way as well. Okay, with very elaborate tableaus, okay, very complex narrative. Okay, you probably won't understand what he's trying to say, okay, but it doesn't matter, right? You can just appreciate, I suppose, the kind of the visual quality of the work, right? Because his work have a kind of painterly quality. It's like looking at frames of, looking at paintings, right? In fact, his works are based on, canonical works, right? paintings. And this particular work, I don't know whether it won a prize at the Venice Biennale, but it was shown to critical acclaim. Okay, in 2011. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. I suppose, I'm going to show you maybe a 2-minute clip of this, maybe at the end, right? Or maybe after this. But there's nothing like being there to see it, okay? Because in the original show in Venice, if you look on the left, there's actually some mist coming out, or clouds, okay, because they use a steam machine, okay? And I think when it was shown here, I believe, right, in Singapore at the Art Museum, did they have steam machine? No, right? Oh, they do have steam machine. Oh, okay. Sorry? Oh, okay, right. But when I was there was no steam machine. There was no, oh, okay. Right. Oh, spoiled, okay. Okay, anyway, so with the steam and all that, I mean, it creates a very immersive atmosphere, okay? And with the sound effects and all that, okay? So you have to be there to see it. I mean, this don't do justice at all, right, to the work. It's a kind of a multi-channel video work, okay? And this the title of the work is based on a medieval text, okay? And the medieval text, and also a work by a certain writer who wrote about, the representation of clouds in art history and art theory. Okay, so Zulian did a study of, how clouds, were represented in various, Western paintings. Okay, and so in this work, he actually used 8 actors. Okay, there were actually 8 characters, right? And it took place in a discarded block of HDB flat. And what happened was that, 8 of these characters, they were probably burdened by physical and material existence. They were in a state of despair, okay? And then they will have an encounter with a cloud-like form or cloud-like figure that you see there, okay? So it's a moment of divine revelation. Okay, it's also a moment of uncertainty for them, right? Okay, so it's all very, very powerful work, right? I mean, if you have the steam machine, the sound effects and all that, right? Very surreal as well. And then you have Alan Wee. Okay, Alan Wee was my student some time back, I think more than 10 years ago, right? He studied at LaSalle. I remember him as someone who is very much interested in, historical paintings, right? And he has gone on to make a name for himself. I'm happy to know that, right? Notably as a curator, right? He curated this very innovative, what I'll call it, show or something called Open House, right? Where you are invited to go into the house of, residents, right? Like let's say in Marine Parade in HDB, flats, okay, where the artist will do some work there, and you'll be taken on tour, right, to that, that particular residence. Okay, and he has also shown one work. He also organized an exhibition in a warehouse which is totally dark, right? Okay, so he came out with a very, very, number of innovative exhibitions, including this one called The End of History. Okay, now these works were first unveiled in 2008 in a performance lecture. Okay, I suppose it's like a theatrical setting. Okay, and it was unveiled that they have found a treasure trove of 40 paintings, okay, by this long lost artist called Huang Wei, right? Okay, and some of you would know that, and people were sort of taken in by that. They thought that, well, Huang Wei was a real historical, figure, okay, that people have forgotten, and now his works have been rediscovered. Okay, but it was only later on that Huang Wei was exposed as a fictional character. Okay, as I would say an alter ego of Alan Wee himself. Okay, and in this series of paintings, okay, Alan would go on to concoct the kind of fiction, surrounding Huang Wei, that he was, he painted. He was a painter who practiced in the 1940s. He was contemporary of the Nanyang artists, okay, like Liu Kang and Chong Su Ping. Okay, but he was different from them because he was influenced more by historical paintings, okay, by the works of the old masters, than by the works of the modern masters, like Matisse, okay, like what the Nanyang artists, you know, they were influenced by Matisse and some of the modern masters. Okay, but Huang Wei was influenced by the works of the old masters. Okay, I suppose by making himself a conduit, a channel, okay, and by taking on the fictional role of Huang Wei, I suppose Alan Wei was also using this work to express his own conundrum about time, space, about history, okay, about the art historical scene here as well. Okay, because as I mentioned, he was very much interested in art, in historical paintings. Okay, but you know that the time of historical painting have long since passed, right? So I suppose that, and also this work is a kind of a missing piece of the Singapore puzzle, you know, because we're always focusing our attention on the Nanyang artists, Liu Kang, Georgette Chen, Chen Hong Sui, okay, but some other artists have been forgotten, right? And in fact, Huang Wei can be seen as a metaphor, you know, in a sense, okay, for long marginalized, long forgotten artists here in Singapore. And there are quite a few, and I'm talking about real artists, you know, real historical artists who have been marginalized, not given enough recognition, okay? Right. So this is quite an interesting work where, you know, Alan created a fictional character and a fictional history even, right, and situation. And many of these kids, right, they are paintings of children, very ghostly, haunting paintings of children. Okay, some of them have their limbs, I mean, they are shown to be deformed as well. Talking about fiction as well. Okay, so you see a number of contemporary artists, you know, in a sense, they mix us fact with fiction. Okay, and one of these artists is Michael Lee. Okay, and now Michael Lee is very much interested in architecture, in urban spaces, in particular with the relationship between space and hidden desires. Okay, space and memory as well. Okay, and he has shown his works. I mean, he was. One thing you notice about Michael Lee is that he's very good with his hands, you know, right? And one can really admire the craftsmanship of his drawings and his models. Okay, and in 2011, the third Biennale in Kallang Airport, right? He showed this work, and it's entitled "Office Architect." Okay, Studio of Fictitious Architect K.S. Wong. Have you all seen this show? This particular work you have, okay? I mean, when I saw it, I thought, wow, K.S. Wong was actually a historical architect. Okay, but when you read further, you realize that he was a fictional character created by Michael Lee. Okay, and there was a quote on the caption, the main text itself. Okay, and it was a quote by K.S. Wong, and K.S. Wong says, "Buildings are a pile of butter." Okay. Meaning to say that I think he's referring specifically to buildings here in Singapore. And do you notice here the architectural landscape? Okay, by the time you come here, let's say you're a visitor visiting in 2014, probably by the time you come in 2016, the building would not have been there anymore. Perhaps, I don't know, you know. So here, you know, we see architectural landscape changing rapidly. Okay, they are like piles of butter. So Michael Lee was very much interested in that architectural history, not the official architectural history, okay, but in buildings that have been long forgotten, there have been buildings that have not been built, right? Okay, and if you look at a quote by Michael Lee, right, he says that the most poetic, okay, types of buildings are those which are deemed useless, right? Okay, architectural ruins and fantasies alike belie the human longing for a better or different world from that which physically exists. So here you have Michael Lee creating such, you know, fantastic kind of imagined buildings, okay, that are not livable spaces. Okay, if you look at his models, they are incredulous. Okay, they cannot be lived in. Okay, but he says that herein lies the kind of the innovative spirit. Okay, like like how it was kind of seen in the life of K.S. Wong, who was a very innovative architect, but throughout his lifetime, he only had one of his designs realized. Okay, his other designs were rejected. Okay, right. So he says something about how we also approach building as well. okay, the design of buildings, okay, and how, you know, certain buildings have been, in a sense, long forgotten or even been destroyed, right? So his work is not only about architecture or urban spaces, it's also about issues relating to fate, to failure, okay, and to other such issues. For those who have seen it, I was very much taken in by the craftsmanship of the work, right? The detail, especially. Look at that. I mean, the one on the upper right. Okay, fantastic buildings, you know, but of course they you know, they can't be lived in, right? Okay, but only exist in imagination. Another very exciting artist, multidisciplinary artist. Okay, and many of these artists, like even Michael Lee. Okay, one other trend you observe is that many of these artists have now gone into curate shows. So they are known as artist curators. Okay, so Jason Lee today is very much an artist curator, right? He's also a multidisciplinary artist. Okay, also a very clever artist in a way that he's able to negotiate the terrain, even though his works deal with political subjects. Okay, he's able to very carefully negotiate that terrain, right? And I don't know whether you'll recall, in 2010, there was this show in Valentine Willy. Okay, Valentine Willy is in Hello Trans, in Tanjong Pagar District Park, right? Okay, it has since closed down, I think a couple of years ago. Okay, but in 2010, they organized a show called Singapore Survey, the Singapore Survey show, right? And in that particular show, I would say all the works, or most of the works, okay, are actually political works, right? But some of them are, most of them are presented in a way, of course, they are very, as I mentioned before, very oblique and very subtle. Okay, but there were a few that, well, you know, I was surprised that, you know, it wasn't censored. I mean, you know, oh, sorry, that the subtitle of that work is called Beyond LKY. Okay, so that makes, I think you all recall now. Okay, that makes the show even more controversial. Okay, but it was surprising, and also it was good to know that, I mean, the censor, those from the MDA didn't come and censor the show or anything like that. Okay, I remember, you know, Jimmy Ong's work of drawings of Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, you know, right? That can be considered to be quite blasphemous in some ways, right? Okay, but yeah, the show was allowed to go on, and of course, Green Zheng's work of you know, those dollar notes featuring political detainees, images of political detainees. Right? I think the website is still on. You can go to, you know, the Beyond LKY website, and Jason Wee's show work. Okay, the one on the left, number 1, Mr. Lee, was shown in that exhibition. All right. Now it's a very clever work. I mean, you can read it at several levels. Okay. Now the show asks you to imagine, ask artists to imagine what it would be like if, you know, if Lee Kuan Yew is gone. Okay, that's why it's called Beyond LKY. So what Jason Wee is doing is he's imagining that. Right? Now if you can see, if the work, now what does it look like? That whole, it looks like a memorial tablet, memorial stone, but at the same time it resembles the number 1. Okay, the numero uno. Okay, number 1. Okay, and it says that in the memory of my father, Mr. Lee. Okay, I mean, not his biological father, but the father of the nation. Okay, it's a tribute to us. It's a tribute. Number 1, father of the nation. Okay, right? But is there something more there? Right? Okay, of course you can read what you call beneath the surface. You can read the subtext of it. Okay, of course, I mean, and that's what exciting about contemporary art as well. Okay, some artists allow you for that sort of interpretation. So on the right, also almost at the same time, this wasn't shown in that show, but it was shown at SAM in this exhibition called the Singapore Art Exhibition. Okay, 2009. Okay, and it's called, another self-portrait is called No More Tears. Now, No More Tears, does it remind you of a commercial? Johnson & Johnson. Okay. And this one will actually use 8,000 bottle caps. Okay, and after, you know, and it resembles, you can see the portrait of Lee Kuan Yew when seen at a certain angle, right? And of course, it's also a tribute. On the surface, it's a tribute to Mr. Lee. You can see that, you know, again, it's also an allusion to 1965, right, when he announced the separation of Singapore and Malaya. Okay, so now there's no need to cry anymore because Singapore is doing very well, right? Okay, but at the same time, if you look at it, he uses shampoo caps. Okay, and I suppose maybe it's a commentary on Singapore as well. Okay, but at what expense? Economic prosperity. Okay, I mean, you have here today, I suppose it's becoming more open, but still like a shampoo is very sterile. Okay, very artificial as well. Okay, so it could be a commentary as well, right, on Singaporean society. Okay, but these are very clever work. And I mean, knowing artists, contemporary artists like Jason Wee, you wouldn't just take these works at face value, right? You want to interpret it, right, a little bit more. Another very, you know, artist whose work is very interesting, Robert Chow Ren Hui. Okay, Robert Chow, he's a photographer, but sometimes in his works, he will also show photographs together with objects and, you know, and documents as well. And Robert Chow is, you know, again, quite an intelligent artist. I mean, he's someone who does a lot of research and someone who works with other people like zoologists, I believe, biologists, right? And he, like a few other artists that we've seen, he also wants to create a fictional world, a fictional situation. And that's what he has been doing with his work so far, right? He even created a fictional institution called Institute of Critical Zoologists, okay? And he said that people go into the website, you know, to inquire about certain animals, you know, right? To kind of pick his brains or, you know, about certain animals. Okay, but he will tell them that, you know, it's a fictional, you know, kind of institution. And he did this work for the recent Singapore Biennale. Okay, it's called A Guide to Flora and Fauna of the World. Now to you, right, this title itself would remind you of the kind of classification, right, that we use for the natural world, the catalogue. Okay, a guide to the animals of the world and all that. Okay, and in Robert Chow's work, he's very much concerned with nature, and in particular the related issues of morality and ethics in nature. Okay, how, for example, human actions and intervention have, you know, changed our relationship with nature. How we manipulate nature for our own, you know, purposes. Okay, I was very much interested in that. So, if you, how many of you have seen this show? You have, right? Okay, it's very interesting. If you look closely, okay, some of the animals are like they are like mutated animals. Okay, he even have a remote control cockroach somewhere, right? And there you see rhinos with no horns. Okay, of course these are fictitious creatures, so he mixes fact and fiction here in his work, right? He wants to draw attention again to, you know, how certain animals have evolved, okay, to survive, but again how human beings have manipulated these animals, okay, for their own scientific purposes and even for manipulation. Okay, you know, for example, those tattooed fishes and, you know, those brightly colored fishes, those were all, you know, kind of genetically, okay, manipulated by human beings. Okay, and in this work, he also wanted to question or test the principles of the way that we receive information and the way that we disseminate knowledge, right? Okay, and in fact, you can buy Robert Chow's work. Okay, what he has done is this. This is not fictitious, huh? It's true. You can buy his work. Okay, he has put together in a very nice, you know, kind of package, you know, 55 of the plates, together with scientific booklets and documents. Okay, right, and you can actually buy them, right? And okay, so these are limited edition works. Okay, so today you can see that, you know, you no longer have the kind of bohemian artists, you know, who wants no money from the government, you know, and who are always struggling to find food and all that. Okay, you have artists who is savvy enough to know that, well, you know, or to recognize that you have to, you know, sometimes commercialize your work, right? But to do it tastefully as well, right? Okay, and probably to recoup some of the cost, okay, you know, of staging your show and all that. Justin Lee. Okay, I'm sure some of you have seen these works. Okay, especially the Terracotta Warriors, right? Okay, in the so-called SAM shops, right? Museum shops in, you know, in Singapore. Okay, and it is part of a series called East and West. Okay, so on the left, so Justin Lee is a person who mixes both Eastern and Western aesthetics and iconography. Okay, and by appropriating the language of pop art, okay, he's able to sort of, you know, to try to show how Asian values in the 21st century have been transformed, okay, by, you know, consumerism and capitalism, right? So on the left, okay, I mean, if you look at the figures, they are just like any kind of traditional figures, okay, figures dressed in traditional garbs, okay, the hair done in a traditional style, okay, but if you look at it, they are not your traditional kind of ladies. They are your modern ladies, contemporary ladies. One is probably carrying a, what do you call it, iPad, right? No, not iPad, iMac, right? Okay, a computer, and the other one is carrying a designer handbag. Okay, and on the right, okay, the Terracotta Warriors, of course, a reference to the Jin Shi Huang's Terracotta Warriors. Okay, they're all wearing a kind of oversized headphones, okay, over their ears, right? So again, you know, here he's I suppose he's making a commentary again, okay, again about globalization, about the effects of globalization, okay, about the kind of the East-West, you know, aesthetics, okay, the East-West in a sense collision as well, right, of values. Okay, so a very interesting artist to look at. Okay, I think I have a few more to go, right? Painting, I mean, you have contemporary artists. In my talk, I think 2 months ago, in 2 talks previously, you know, I spoke about painting. Oh, in my first talk, in the first series of, in this series of talk, I spoke about painting, okay? And I spoke about how painters today try to draw attention to, you know, the processes and materials of painting, okay? And try to re-examine the representational aspects of painting, okay? So, contemporary painters today are what you call deconstructing. They want to draw attention to how the painting is constructed, right? Okay, like Jane Lee. Okay, now Jane Lee also, you know, I said in that talk that, you know, she was also my former student, okay, at LaSalle. Okay, I mean, when she joined LaSalle, she was already a very mature student. Okay, she was I think in her 40s, and today she has become a very successful artist, right? And I think all credit due to her, of her willingness to experiment, okay, to re-examine, you know, the processes of painting, right? And I mean, I was glad to also say that, you know, it was in my class, my art history class, that, you know, she became interested in a particular artist called Robert Ryman. Okay, and Robert Ryman, you know, was a minimalist painter, okay, who in his work was very much concerned with the processes and materials of painting, okay, and that really, you know, set her off to on a career to experiment, okay, with painting. And she used to have, she used to work with textiles as well, you know. So if you look at her work, you know, there's a kind of fabric-like quality as well in her work. Okay. So in her work, you can see this was in the 2008. I think for those who saw it, this was another memorable work, right? It was just, was it City Hall or Supreme Court? City Hall. Supreme Court, I think, yes. Okay, just up the staircase. And you know, the whole, as you can see, the whole wall was filled with, okay, the painting here by Jane Lee. Okay, and I believe this work was actually bought later on. Okay, I can't remember the name of the collector. It was actually bought. I don't know. I mean, must have a big house to display this. Okay, must have, of course, obviously a big house. Okay, and as you can see, Jane Lee, you know, I mean, here her work has gone beyond painting. Okay, to take on a very, you know, three-dimensional sculptural-like quality, right? It can be seen even as a sculptural work, as an installation work, okay, where even the paint has gone beyond the frame itself, right? So in her work, she has questioned the whole processes of painting itself, okay, from the way the paint is applied to the way it's framed and exhibited. Right? So very, very innovative artist, okay, to know. Okay, and Don, have you all seen Walter the Rabbit in person? Oh, you have seen? No. Anyone seen? Oh, where do you see it? Can I know? Which part? SMU. Oh, Sam. Oh, okay, Sam, right. Yeah, Sam. I don't have a picture of it being in the front lawn of Sam. Okay. Yeah, Walter the Rabbit. I believe it was commissioned by Sam, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, the rabbit itself. Okay. Don, I believe, is a France-based artist. Okay, and here she created Walter the Rabbit because she wants us to think like children, to look at things like children, with an element of surprise and wonder. Now, what things does she want us to look at? Ordinary things. Okay, ordinary places. Okay, so that's why she created this, I think about a 6 by 4 meter, okay, rabbit, right? And she inserted them in places around Singapore, mainly in the heartland enclaves, okay, like, old shop houses, HDB estates, right, MRT lines. Okay, so here, she said that Singapore has always been obsessed with trying to be a first-class society, right? To build the most spanking malls, casinos, etc. Okay, and some people have considered our architecture to be very boring as well. Okay, so she says, but that's not the case, right? In the heartlands, you can see the kind of rustic charm there, right? In your old shop houses, in the HDB, tapestry of flats, right? Okay, so, and she says she wanted to create a childlike surprise and wonder of what is so special about a place and get people to re-evaluate what they see. Okay, so she wants to get people to re-examine the overlooked and over-familiar places. Okay, right? So maybe Walter the Rabbit is all of us get to look at, places with childlike wonder and surprise. Okay, 2 more to go. Sorry. This is another very exciting artist, right? Very young artist, Choon Kai-Feng. In 2009, he exhibited this together with Michael Lee's work of Lee Kuan Yew using bottle caps, and he won the top prize, okay, from that particular show, the Singapore Art Exhibition. Okay, so this work actually won the top prize. Okay, I remember seeing this work. Okay, it was displayed like a diorama. Okay, a diorama is like a kind of miniature model. Okay, where you see in museums, you display it on a glass case. Okay, so this is like, you can't enter this space. Okay, you can only see it from a glass window. Okay, but when you look in, you see that it's like an office space. There's no doubt about it. Okay, there's a laptop, there's some files, stationery, drawers, etc. Okay, but you'll notice something that it looks very sterile, very clean, very pure, the space itself, right? You'll notice also something, there's no human presence, okay? Right. But then you look at the objects carefully, okay? You'll see some stationery there, but then if you look at the stationery there, okay, interspersed among some of the objects like the stationery on the table, you see a knife, right? So this work is more than what meets the eye. Okay, he has created a kind of a psychological space here, right? In which it's like a Hitchcock setting, I suppose. That you don't quite know what has happened or what is going to happen next. Okay, what is the knife for? Where's that guy who is working here or that person? Right? Has he been pushed to the edge? And okay, and so as Choon Kai-Feng himself said, this work speaks of forlornness. Okay. It could be the kind of the same old life that we lead every day, okay, going back to the same office, corporate office, right? And as the artist says, it's about the kind of the aestheticization and the anesthetization of everyday life, okay, right? And is also about, I suppose, you know, the desire to transgress as well. Okay, hence, for example, the knife over there. Right? So if you look at Kai Feng's work, he makes a lot of commentary as well about, you know, the way Singaporean society operates, right? The way we live our lives here as well. Oh, you don't have this? Sorry. I thought I just showed this last work. Okay, Vertical Submarine. Okay. Now, Vertical Submarine is a collective of 3 artists, and they make very tongue-in-cheek works, very witty works that mainly revolve around wordplay and text. Okay. Now, their works are not easy to, in a sense, interpret. Okay, but some of their works are quite interesting, like this one here called Flirting Point. Okay, I believe it was exhibited for about 10 months in front of SAM. Okay, but it was first commissioned by Zouk, okay, for one of their events, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so this work is a kind of a commentary, okay, a commentary on social, the social situation. Okay, maybe here is peculiar, maybe to Singapore society, right? How we flirt with certain things, you know, right? When we go to a museum, we pretend to see the artworks, but actually we are looking at other physical forms, something like that, right? But also, I think it's also a commentary on Singaporean society itself, right? Where everything here is prescribed, is policed, is controlled. Okay? Remember Ram Koolhaas quotation? Right. Okay, so even flirting, okay, has to be, you know, yeah, you know, there's a place and time to do it, right? But I don't know whether there were many takers, right, who actually flirt on this point, okay? But, you know, so ironically and not surprisingly, you see that although the work has declared its intention for people to flirt, okay, I don't think, you know, it has achieved, right? You did, is it? Oh, sorry.
We say some parents complain.
Oh, really?
Because students were hanging under the...
Oh, dear, really? Okay, I see, okay. Wow. I know that it was a very popular play for Shutterbug, so I don't know what those students were doing, right? Okay. Yeah. Wow, okay. Yeah, but tongue-in-cheek work, to make us think of, you know, again, of the society in which we lived in, okay, and a very wry commentary on, I suppose, social situations as well, right? Okay, I've done. In fact, nowadays I am quite punctual.